Hello everyone, Steve Angel with Traditional Outdoors, and we're going to continue our scouting and deer hunting series today with a deeper look at layers within Google Earth. We touched on layers just briefly in our introduction to Google Earth video that was released just a few days ago. But today we're going to really get in and show you how you can use layers to enhance your scouting and deer hunting research within Google Earth itself. Now, when we talk about layers, there's really, from my perspective, two types of layers that you can use within Google Earth. The first being a layer that you create. So typically that's using another image. It could be updated or enhanced satellite imagery, which we're going to show here. It could also be a map that you find that contains public land boundaries or trail information for a map. It could be Plat data. So we're going to talk about that one, and I'll show you an example of that as well. We've talked about onX Maps, and again, I'm a firm believer in onX Maps. I love the product, but if you're on a budget or maybe you just have a small area that you're wanting to look at and can't really justify spending the money for onX, I'm going to show you a way that you could potentially get that same feature using freely available resources. The other type of layer that you can add is a KMZ import. We've talked about KMZ files repeatedly. One thing I did have a question about from another viewer, the difference between KML and KMZ. They're the same thing. The only thing a KMZ file is it takes the data in a KML file and compresses it in some form of a zip file. So KML and KMZ are interchangeable. There's no difference in those two. One's just a compressed file and one's not. So want to make sure I got that out there. But with those KMZ imports that function as a layer, the benefit of those is most of those are going to be geotagged, so you just double click it, import it, it's already aligned, it's ready to go. With the ones that you create yourself, while you've got a lot more flexibility and a sky's the limit kind of approach as to what you can bring into Google Earth, it does take a little bit of time to get that imported and situated correctly on the map. So with that, we're going to jump right in. And the first thing we're going to show you is how to add an updated image, satellite imagery. So Bing Maps is a really good site. We haven't talked about Bing Maps, but they actually do pretty good with regards to updating satellite imagery and providing a little bit more detail in the satellite imagery. So I want to show you how you can actually go out and find one of those maps and add it as an overlay within Google Earth. It might give you a little bit more information, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's been a recent clear cut that doesn't show up in Google Earth, but it does in Bing, and you want to be able to look at that. So I've got a little demo area that I set up. We talked about briefly in the last video, and I'm going to have to change my perspective on that a little bit because in doing the research for this video, I found that it is private land. So as we move forward, I'll probably be shifting away from this area, but because it's familiar and I've actually done a little bit of research, we're going to go ahead and use that for this particular video, and it will apply anywhere. But in that demo area, one of the features that we had was a small pond, and this is the small pond in or on Bing Maps. And if I come up here and do a drop down and click aerial, now it'll change to an aerial view. And the way that I actually found this location easily is I already had it saved in CalTopo. Here, I just grabbed that location and copied and pasted into Bing Maps, and it carried me right to this little pond. So I've got the pond here. Now, I've got to get this as an image file to then import into Google Earth. And there's several ways you can do that. One, you can just do a screenshot or screen capture. The problem with that is you're going to also get all this information up here that you don't really need. Close some of this stuff out here. The other way within Windows is the snipping tool. And you can find this a lot of ways. You can do a search, you can do a run in Windows, but it's just the snipping tool. And there's counterparts to this available for Mac and Windows. I'm not going to get into those because I'm not familiar with them, but the snipping tool works really well. And what you would do with a snipping tool is you just create new, and then you find a place on the map, and you want to pick a location that has enough information on the map so that you can align this within Google Earth. Here I've got a couple of roads, I've got some open fields, I've got the pond that we're using. So what I want to do is I want to come over here somewhere around here. I click my left mouse button and hold it down, and then I just drag this little cross across the screen, and anything that highlights there, when I let go of that left mouse button, is going to be captured as an image. Now, right now it's just in memory, so the first thing you have to do is you click File and Save, and you want to save this as a JPEG or a PNG file. I use JPEG for the most part. And then I would just click OK, and I would save that. Once I've saved that file, then I can go back to Google Earth. And you'll see we've got Google Earth open. I've not navigated anything yet, but I do have that demo area that we talked about in the previous video. So I'm just going to double click here, and without putting a check mark in that box, it's not going to show me that. It's just going to zoom into that general area. And there I can see that field that I could see in Bing Maps, and there is my pond. Now once I have this, I'm going to center this on the screen just a little bit. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and locate my Add Image button, which we talked about in the previous video. And when I click that, I get a dialog box. Now, you'll see here a link. I could actually put in, if I found an image file on the internet, I could actually link directly to that. I don't recommend it for various reasons. One, because the link could go away in the future and then you don't have it anymore. But I can also browse. And here I can go and I can browse. I know where I'm saving all of these files for this demo is here. So I can go and I can browse to that file. So if I click on this and click open, it's going to import that image onto Google Earth as an overlay. And there is the pond that I'm looking at. But as you can see here, I know that's too big. Now, to look through this image so that I can see what's underneath in Google Earth and I can line all this up, I'm going to use this slider to drag the opacity down to where I can see through this image into Google Earth. And about right here, let me come up a little bit more. I can see my pond right here. It doesn't show up too well, but I can see that it's there. If I come all the way up, there's the pond on this map. And I've got to line those up, and more importantly, I've got to get the scale right, because you can see there's a huge difference in the size. Now, this dialog box here has to stay open while you're editing and moving this image. If I click OK, it's going to be here, but it'll be permanently locked just like you see it here. So I've got to keep this open. So I'm just going to move it down out of the way where I can still get to it when I need to, and I'm going to scroll my map out a little bit. And then we're going to talk about all these different green markers. Now, this one in the center, if I click on this, I can move that image around on the map. The one here at the top and the one here at the bottom will allow me to change the aspect of this file so I can make it shorter. Same thing goes here on the sides. I've got one here and I've got another one over here. I can make the image smaller this way. And then the ones on the corners will allow me to bring and make this entire image file smaller. And we're going to bring this all the way down till we get it pretty small, maybe about right there. And then I'm going to move this up and I'm going to scroll in a little bit so that I can make the pond bigger on my screen. And I want to get it about the same size that it is there, but I may actually make this a little smaller so that we can get all this on the screen here. Okay, so now I've got my pond here and I've got my image file here. So we're going to slide this up a little bit and start really trying to align these two. And I'm going to put that pond right on top of the pond here. Now, if I change the opacity again, here's the pond on the image that I overlaid. And if I remove this down, you can see that I've got the pond underneath it. Now, there's still a little bit of difference in the size, but not a lot. So now what I've got to do is I've got this road here and this curving road here, and I can see There is this road here is right here on my image overlay. If I zoom this back up again a little bit more, now you can see it there. I know I've got the pond fairly close aligned, so now what I want to do is I want to come over here and I want to slide this over until that road lines up. And now you can see that I've got a road here and I've got this road here, so now this doesn't quite align. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to drag this up a little bit and align those two. And now we're getting really close. So I'm getting close to having this aligned. With this, I'm going to stop. You get the idea how this works. I've already imported this, and I'm going to turn it on in a minute so you can see. But you can see how you move this around to line everything up, and you really want to get this as close as you possibly can. Now, one little control we didn't talk about is this diamond here. And most of the time, you're not going to have to worry about the diamond, but there will be some cases where the map, for whatever reason, your image is not properly aligned with the map. This could be particularly true if you've been navigating around in Google Earth, moving things around, and you change the orientation of Google Earth. But this diamond will allow you to rotate that entire image around. You can do pretty much whatever you want to with it. So if that ever does happen and things get out of alignment, then you can use that diamond to move things around. But from here, I would just keep manipulating this until I got everything aligned the way it needed to be aligned, and then I would save that image. Now, when you click OK, it would save that, just like I've got this one saved here, and we can turn this one on, and you can see that this one is aligned with all the roads. It really lines up very well, and you can tell just by looking at it, there's no opacity there at all because it really stands out. Now, if I ever need or want to change any of that, I come down here and click Properties, and you can see the opacity is all the way to the right. I can slide this back to the left, and now I can start to see through that. So, again, this is an image overlay. If it was updated satellite imagery or just provided more detail, it can give you a much better view of what you're looking at than perhaps the default Google satellite imagery. So that's the reason you might want to bring in an image overlay. So I'm going to turn this back off, and we're actually going to change locations here in just a minute, but I want to come back over to my browser and show you another example here of something you might want to import. So this is a track in a local wildlife management area. It's Dawson Forest WMA, and this particular track is the City of Atlanta track. And as you can see here, there's a lot of trails. Now, these trails in particular are horse trails, so while horses are not supposed to be used on these trails during hunting season until after 10 o'clock, for obvious reasons, you might want to know where these hunting trails are, both from a safety perspective as well as from a perspective of when people start moving through these trails on horseback, there's a good chance you're going to push deer to you. And this is a PDF file which I can't import into Google Earth, but what I can do is I can do the same thing as I did before. I can use my snipping tool. Come on. And I could do new, and I can grab a copy of this image. Now, I've already done that, and I've got it saved, but this allows you to choose what on this map you want to include. You may actually want to include the legend here so that you can see that on the map, or maybe you don't care and you don't want to include that. And by using the snipping tool, I can select only what I want to see. If I come back over here to my folder, you can see that I have saved this trail map. I've saved this trail map as an image file. And in Google Earth, I've actually already imported that here. So if I click here, it'll take it to that area on the map. And I'll show you a couple of things here. So the first thing, I've actually imported the boundary for this, and we're going to talk about this in the next video about importing these boundaries, but I've actually got that one already saved right here. So that's the boundary for the City of Atlanta track. Now, if I turn this image on, and this is that trail map JPEG file. You can see when I open the properties, I can see it there hiding beneath it. But I've actually already imported that into the map. Now I've turned it on, and you can see that I've got these trails now illuminated on the map so that I can see and know where they are in relation to where I'm maybe planning to hunt. Now, how I lined this up was actually pretty easy. If I turn the opacity back up, I can show you some things I can see here. I can see this creek, the Amicalola Creek coming in. I can see the Etowah River. I can see where those two join. I can also see that on this map, I've got a power line that's outlined here, and those will generally show up really well. So when I was aligning this map, those are the features that I really looked for, and as I change the opacity, you can see I've got the power line here, and I've got this creek that comes down here and the Etowah River that's coming over here, and right there is where they merge together. And when I bring the opacity back up, you can see that those align on my overlay. So now I know that I've got this aligned. Now, let's just say, and I haven't saved much on this map, but I know I do have a route here that I'd planned on going to a location to scout. And you can see that part of that route, that pink line, that route that I've laid out actually follows that horse trail, and it looks like probably a couple of 100 yards off of that horse trail. So as far as a hunting perspective with a bow, I'm safe here. But that's just an example of how this can really come in handy from a scouting perspective. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our demo area because the next part of this I want to show you involves that same area that we've been looking at. So I actually found out as I was doing the research for this video that this is private property, so I won't be able to do any boots on the ground here. So I will be shifting up into this area to do boots on the ground videos going forward. This is a wilderness area, not too far away, and I was hoping this was actually part of the Chattahoochee National Forest, but it is not. Now, how did I find that out, and how would that play into what we're talking about here? So let's just assume that I had actually gotten permission to hunt this property, which I don't, but let's assume I had, and I actually wanted to determine where the property boundaries were through Google Earth. Now I can do that using Plat data. And Plat data is really what is collected for onX maps. And again, it requires a little bit of work, but if you're only doing a few small tracks or maybe a small track, it doesn't necessarily justify the expense of onX maps. Again, great product, and I love the product, but I'm trying to also give you alternative methods for doing this. So there are a lot of different sites available that will allow you to collect Plat data. This is qpublic.net. And I've done a search here within Gilmer County, which I know to be the county that we're looking at here. And through a little bit of work, I just browsed around, and there's the pond. So what I know here is this line here is my property boundary for this particular tract of land. So now that I have that information, I can see exactly where the property boundaries are, and I can actually now bring this into Google Earth as an image overlay, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. But when you find these Plat maps for areas, they actually provide a lot of information because you can actually go in and see who owns a specific tract of land. Now, I'm not going to click on this one because it is an individual and I don't want to share that publicly. However, this one I know to be a business owns it. Now, it could be this property's in foreclosure, who knows. But if I click here, it'll show me who owns this, Round Mountain LLC, which means it's probably being developed. It's 19 acres. It gives me a value. And I can even dig a little bit further, as you can see down here. And I can find, in some instances, there actually may even be a phone number listed here so that I can reach out to somebody and even ask about potentially hunting on that property. So these Plat sites are very useful. If you've never used them, never heard of them, I would highly suggest you spend a little bit of time researching Plat maps and learning how you can use those for finding new properties to hunt. But for the purpose of this video, we're not going to really talk about that much more. We're going to actually show you how you can pull this in. So I used the same snipping tool, and I created an image file of this same, and you can see the property there, boundary there in blue. If I'd have clicked on it in the other window, it would have shown up as blue, but it would also shown the property owner name, which I didn't want to do. So now that I've got this, what I can do is come back over to Google Earth, and now I can add a layer, and I can browse to my Plat file that I saved, and it's going to do the same thing and pull that into Google Earth. So I'm going to do as I've done before. I'm going to reduce my opacity. I'm going to scroll out, find my pond here, which is right in this general area. And you can see that we've got a very large map size there. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to scroll in. I've lost my, oh, here we go. I've gotten over to the left. So there's my pond. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this so that I can get it to where it's about the same size as my Google Map image. I'll move this over. So there's my pond there. Here's my pond here. We're still a little too large, so we'll zoom this down a little bit more. Now we're getting pretty close, and I can drag this up and place it on the map. We'll zoom back in a little bit, get things sorted out here. Here's my pond on this map. There's my pond on the Google Earth, so we'll slide this up, get this over the top of it. Now I can zoom in a little bit more, and you'll see we've got the road here, and we've got this road on the map. So I'll adjust this a little bit more to get everything to line up here. I'm not going to get this perfect for this video, but I'll get it pretty close. I've got a road here and I've got a road here, so I want to slide this out to align that. And you get a general idea of what I'm doing here. I've got some roads here, so I'll line those up. And keep in mind that not everything is going to line up perfectly. And that's just for various differences in the way Google Earth sees the contour of the land and so forth. So I've got this pretty close, so I'm kind of going to stop right here. I think it's close enough that I can show you what I'm trying to demo. Now I can always see this through this image. I could export this and bring it into my GPS just like this if I've got a newer GPS. However, what I can also do, and let's save this as Plat overlay, and we'll save this so I can get this out of my way. I'm going to bring this opacity up just a little bit more now that I know that I've got it aligned. And I'm going to save this here, then I'm going to bring this down, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so I can really see that blue line. So this is my property boundary. Well, now what I could do if I wanted to is I could come up here and click my path tool, move this out of the way a little bit, and now I can come up and I can actually create a boundary for this property using my path tool. And I'm not going to go all the way through that, but you get the idea. And then I can come in here and I can change this to a color I can really see very easily. I'll change this to a 4 so that that shows up. And now, sorry, I'll name that boundary. Set that to 4. And now you can see what I can do is I can actually use this tool to create my own property boundary that is saved as a path. I can then export that and pull it into CalTopo or anything I want to do. So just another way that you can combine two capabilities into this tool so that I can import an image that shows me my boundary. Then I can use my path tool to create a boundary that I can then move into CalTopo or export into my GPS. And now I can see on the map where I am in relation to where that property boundary ends. So it's just really cool what you can do with this, with the layers feature. And then if I don't want to see it, I can either uncheck it, or I could come in here and change the opacity and bring it down even lower so that I can just barely see that through the image overlay. So that's going to be the end of the creating your own layers. From there, we're going to go back to one more website, and this video is going to run a little over the 20-minute mark, but there's a lot to cover here, and I want to make sure I get it all in. So the best example I can give you of being able to bring in a layer that's already been created for you, we'll go back to the National Geological Survey Map database. And hopefully you remember from the first video, we talked about how to navigate in here and how you can choose the size and scale map you want. And then you can see this is the GPS quadrant for that area that we've been looking at. So now that I've got this quadrant selected, I can see I've got the newest map I've got is 1988. So I'll select that map, and then I will download this KMZ file, which is going to download this topographic map as a KMZ file that we can then import into Google Earth. So let me come back over to my folder here where I'm saving all these files, and you see now I've got a KMZ file with the same name as this GPS quadrant. Now if I double click this, what it's going to do is it's going to pop back over to Google Earth, and it's going to import that KMZ as a topo map into Google Earth. And sometimes this can take just a few minutes because it's a lot of data to import. Well, now you can see the topo map overlaid on Google Earth, and these will align by themselves because they do have the geotagging within them. Now I'm going to turn this Plat overlay off for just a minute. And now if I scroll back in, I'm going to click on this area just so it centers Google Earth in the same area that we've been looking at. And there's my pond. That's the same pond that we've been looking at all along. So if I bring this up here, I can do the same thing here that I did with the image overlay. If I select this little square here, it's going to give me an opacity slider. And I can slide this down to where now I can see Google Earth through that topo map. If I scroll in and get real close, now what you can also see is you can see the imagery, but you can also see these topo contour lines through the, you can see through the topo map to see the contour lines on the image overlay, which is extremely useful. If you think back in one of the early videos, we talked about hillmap.com where it showed you a topo view on one side of the screen and an image view on the other, and I said I'd found better ways to do this. Well, this is the better way, because now not only can I see the satellite imagery, but I can see the contour lines through that satellite imagery. I can increase it on the fly. So if I want to get real close, and let's see, I want to look at this saddle, which is, the lowest point between these two peaks. This saddle right here, I can bring that down, and then I can reduce this so that I can actually see all the way. Well, we got a house there. So while that would probably be a great place to hunt before this house was built, now it's not really appealing to me. So I can take that off my list. So image overlays are, they're just extremely useful within Google Earth. And now you can see we're starting to build on some of the complexity of things that we can do and what we're going to be looking at. I think on the next video, we're going to talk about how you can actually create waypoints and then import and export those between some of the various tools and use those. And we still have to get a Garmin Basecamp video in here somewhere, but I really wanted to get into some of the really cool things that you can do to show you just how flexible Google Earth can be. So we ran a little bit over here. We're coming up on the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and end this video now. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, please subscribe to the channel so you're notified of any future videos we release. And best of luck to you in your scouting and especially your hunting adventures this fall. Take care, everyone.